So it's growing around 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch a day, and the stem still feels firm on it. So ain't no telling how big this onion is going to get. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a wonderful day. It is Wednesday, March 22nd here in South Georgia. Feels like spring again out here. We're in the low 80s today, and that means I need to get caught up on some planting. Got some cabbage and broccoli transplants in the greenhouse that are way overdue. Gonna try to get one more round of those planted. But before we do that, we're gonna check to see if we got any frost damage the last few nights. And I also wanna show you just how fast our onions are growing. So earlier this week, we got down to 31 one night and then 35, 36 another night. I wasn't worried about most of this stuff out here, just a few things. You can see we've got that bed covered and this one over here. First, let's check on the things that we didn't cover. The potatoes here. We did mound some soil around these plants, which seemed to help. Got a little bit of burn on some of those leaves there, but pretty minimal damage. So everything's looking good with our raised bed taters and our in-ground taters way over there. Now I was a little bit worried about these snow peas here, but they look just fine. This taller variety here, which I think is called Blizzard, doesn't seem to have taken any damage. Might have got a hair bit of leaf burn on this variety, which is that blue shelling pea. And now that we're back in the low 80s, we can take this covering off our little baby pickles here, which should be okay. They still look a little rough from that time we didn't cover them a week or so ago, but hopefully they'll recover. If not, we can just replant. And we can go ahead and take the covering off this bed as well, where we have some summer squash planted, and those look really good. About time to thin those out a little bit. So we feel fortunate that we didn't receive any significant damage from that last little early spring frost. I know not everybody was spared. I saw a picture from one of our Facebook followers who's in South Louisiana, further south than we are, and his taters look pretty rough. So now that it's warmed back up around here, we need to get these beautiful transplants in the ground right over here in this blank space we have between our onions and garlic. But before we do that, let's check on our onions and garlic. So I feel like it was only just a couple weeks ago when we did a video out here on this plot showing you how our onions had just started bulbing. They had just started kind of enlarging there at the base of the plant. So what I'm about to show you now has happened in a matter of 10 to 14 days. So we have quickly went from onions that were just starting to bulb to that right there. Onions about 4 inches in diameter, and they don't look like they plan on stopping anytime soon. So let's take a little closer look at some of these. This is our red onion that we planted, a variety called Chianti, and it's just starting to bulb. I could see the ground cracking there before I pulled the soil away. So that one still has a ways to go. We can tell how thick the neck is there, that's going to end up being a pretty dang big onion. Now in the second row, we've got a variety called DP Sweet, which is one we grew last year, performed really well for us last year. And from my experiences last year, this is one of the earlier maturing varieties amongst the 5 different varieties we have planted. And I've been keeping my eye on this particular onion over the last few days, and it's crazy how fast it is growing. Just a few days ago, this onion was about 3 or 4 inches in diameter. Right now, it's about 5 or 6 inches in diameter, so it's growing around 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch a day, and the stem still feels firm on it. So ain't no telling how big this onion is going to get. Now in this third row, we've got a variety called Timon. We grew this one last year as well. This is a round sweet onion, and last year this one didn't get as big as the DP Sweet onions, and I don't expect them to get as big this year either. But we're starting to get some nice round onions there. So not the size that we'll get from the flat DP Sweet onions, but these round onions will store a good bit better. So the size of onions you make will depend on a lot of different things. Fertilizer, water, just how the weather's been, but it's also a variety thing. Some varieties just make bigger onions than others. But what I'm about to show you, this comparison is going to show you the importance of timely planting. So these two rows right here, where we have a variety called Georgia Boy and then a variety called White Phantom, I believe, were planted about 2 or 3 weeks after these over here. Now these onions that we planted later have started to bulb, as we see down there, because bulbing is triggered by day length in onions. So those have already started bulbing, and we can look at the difference between the foliage or the leaf size on those we planted earlier versus those we planted later. Huge difference there. So we're going to get a lot bigger onions over here, where we've got a lot more leaves, bigger leaves, than we are over here, where our leaves aren't near as big. So timing is very important, but it's not everything. For example, there's a guy down the road about 5 miles who plants his onions before I do every single year. Plants them out there in front of the road. He's always the first one around here to plant onions. Now his have already started bulbing, and I can tell just by riding by that they're not going to be very big onions. And I told Brooklyn the other day, when I saw how big the leaves were, he didn't get enough fertilizer to those onions. So timing is important, but it's also important to give them the nutrients they need. Having the chickens on this plot for a couple months before we planted our onions is going to make us look like we know what we're doing. And had these plants not gotten laid flat to the ground by that Arctic blast we had right before Christmas, there's no telling how big some of these would get. So the moral of the story is plant your onions on time and feed them well. Now if you're in Nebraska, I can't tell you when you should be planting onions. I only know down here for our area through experimentation. But if you're unsure when you should be planting onions, I would say stagger a couple plantings one year and see how they perform. That should give you a good idea of when the perfect timing is. And then as far as the feeding goes, just work under the assumption that there's no such thing as over-fertilizing onions. Yes, I'm sure it can be done. I've never done it. Now, we didn't fertilize or supplement these a whole lot here because the chicken manure was feeding them pretty well. We only side dressed them one time with 1300, but just work under the assumption you can't overdo it on onions. Feed them if you want big onions. Now while these onions are looking great, this garlic over here is just looking okay. Not really sure why. It's gotten the same treatment as those onions have. Same way we grow garlic every year. Using the pine straw worked really good for us last year. A good bit of my soft neck garlic didn't even come up at all. Not sure what happened there. We're still going to get a bunch of garlic from this plot here. Just the plants aren't quite as big as I would expect them to be this far along. Now my plan was to put some watermelons in this plot at some point, but I'm not quite sure when that's going to be. I was going to start my watermelon seeds in the greenhouse this week, but these onions don't look like they're slowing down anytime soon. So I think I'm going to hold off another week. We'll be late getting our watermelons planted, but they should still do just fine. So since the onions are going to be a little longer, we might as well fill this blank space right here. Try to see if we can get a fast crop of cabbage and broccoli out of it. So we've already got a drip system in this plot, and we've actually got it running right now because you can't give onions enough water when they're in this bulbing phase. So we're laying it to them right now, but having a system already in place will make things pretty easy for our planting today. I just need to go find me a couple old drip lines under the barn that we can reuse, put them down right here, hook them up to that main line, and we should be good to go. All right, so we did our little fad system there. We made a furrow, amended the furrow with some Nature Safe 855, and then added some drip tape in the furrow. I've got the drip tape on now, and I put these rows about 3 foot apart. I wanted to kind of stack them in there tight. That way, if this stuff is not done, when these onions are done, I can kind of work around this little space right here as far as my watermelon planting goes. Now let's talk about what we got as far as our transplants go. So we've got some Chinese cabbage here, some Savoy cabbage, some green magic broccoli, and then some imperial broccoli. Now these probably could have went in the ground a couple weeks ago. We started having those cold spells. Made me a little nervous with these baby transplants, so we waited. That might have been a bad decision. They're starting to wrap a little bit there, as you can see. So might have a little bit of transplant shock, but we'll just see what we get. So this drip tape here has a 12-inch emitter spacing. I can see one right there, and one right there. I might could plant this Chinese cabbage a little closer than 12 inches apart, but it's just going to work out easier with our emitter spacing here to do it on a 1 foot spacing. So grab one of our little transplants here. That one there's a little dry. Put it right beside that emitter and cover it up a little bit there. Grab a nerdin right here, and I'll probably do half Chinese cabbage, half Savoy cabbage on this row, and then split the 2 varieties of broccoli on that second row. All right, we got them in. A 30-foot row of 2 different types of cabbage and a 30-foot row of 2 different varieties of broccoli. Now this is definitely not my favorite time of year to be growing cabbage or broccoli. Once it starts getting hot, broccoli heads can get seedy in just a matter of days. Cabbage can also bolt pretty quick once it warms up around here in mid to late spring. But since we had the transplants, we had the space, it's worth a shot. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Be sure to check out our affiliate links in the description below, and go check out our website, lazydogfarm.com. And let me know in the comments below if you're starting another round of cool season veggies right now, or are you just focusing on planting warm season stuff. And if you want to know more about how to grow big onions, be sure to check out this video right here. We break down our top 10 tips for how to grow big onions, and I promise you, if you follow these 10 tips, you will grow some big onions. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.